These tulips, of course, are not native, but I am watching what happens to people as spring happens. I mean, we've been under a blanket of snow for, I think, 3 months. And suddenly, native people are coming out. I am watching what happens to people as spring happens. I mean, we've been under a blanket of snow for, I think, 3 months. And responding to just the natural world. And it reminded me, coming out and planting things and watering things and doing all of that. And it reminded me a little bit of the arc of this episode, I have to say, because for those of you who weren't in the original broadcast, which is to say people who might be watching the talkback, we started with me asking about where were you, what were you thinking 2020 was going to be like? And we capture some of that in the edit, but in the watching of the unedited version, which you can probably find on our podcast feed in a few days, everyone begins kind of down. We had these ideas, we were going to be doing this, we were going to be doing that. But then very quickly, as we all reflect on what we actually did during this year, what you all actually did during this year, this COVID year of 2020, your spirits just lift and you get so excited. And I have to say, that's been a really exciting way to start this year, to think about the good that's come out of so much grief and so much loss. These two things existing together seems like a lesson in and of itself. Favianna, you're a kind of quantum Zen person yourself.
So I really believe that as part of us as human beings healing our relationship to the planet and to nature, it is really understanding that we are also like the seasons, we are like nature. We need time to hibernate, to recuperate, especially after traumatic events. And now is the time for the new fruit to come. And I love hearing X talk about what is about to come, because it's time for it. And we had an opportunity earlier this year to really get ready and prepare the soil, which to me, the soil is really like our creative landscape. That's why I believe that, when we garden, when we touch the earth, and what X said, it's so true. Like, our art is about creation. It's about creation of new life and new ideas, and then allowing those to blossom. And then they go through a period of shifting, which is the fall. And then sometimes the things have to die, which is the winter. So I'm feeling like really amazed even at what the new administration is doing, like just like in terms of where we start, we are in such a different place. And I think we've had time now to think about our new posture, right? What is our new posture? Because it's definitely not, it's not the same fists that we had in the previous administration. It's something different. And so I've been, whether it's the confirmation of Deb Haaland or, this new, the new payment that's going out to children, which is the beginning of a poverty plan, or the infrastructure plan, right? I'm just like, what? And to seeing our friend like Jade Begay be part of the administration, I mean, it's a very different time. And I think we need to show up in a different way. It doesn't mean we fight any less or we create any less. It just means it's a new posture. And that's what I love about art, is that art is able to capture that and reflect that and adapt to it.
Anything you want to add to that, X? And I want to encourage people who are watching us now in the YouTube chat to pose questions to our guests. I've kind of had my try. You get your chance now. X, how are you responding to this moment? It has been kind of extraordinary, but as Aja so beautifully said, my expectations are not in the administration, they're in we the people.
Yeah, and that's where I'm really looking too, is as this new administration gets grounded and begins, on doing some things, you also start to see too, like how much of what was promised and what was said was, for the sake of garnering support for re-election or for winning this election, and how much of it is this administration really going to fight for, and so obviously, like, I'm taking everything with a little bit of with caution, and not allowing my expectations to get too high of this administration, while also being grateful and for the material benefits for our communities and for our people and for pathways to citizenship and these different things that really materially affect my community and my family and people around me. So it's bittersweet, I think, entering this space, but yeah, my attention is, and I think will continue to be, and the excitement will continue to be at what happened last year in the streets, not even so much at the polls, but like what happened in the streets, how that momentum can continue to catalyze revolutionary conversation into this year. I think the return of land to indigenous peoples and the land back movement has blossomed into a continued conversation of an alternative political reality. And so I'm excited to see how that continues to flourish.
Well, let's talk about that blossoming. Joy Silverman in LA, thank you for joining us. Joy has a question for both of you, which is, how do we get people on board to sustain the new direction that we want to go in when the window between now and midterms may be so short? And I've been thinking also about Heather McGhee's new book, The Sum of Us. I just got to interview Heather last week. And in the introduction, she talks about the people who first colonial settlers, stealers of land, came to this part of the East Coast here. And instead of creating the new world that could really have been new, they create a hierarchy just without themselves at the bottom of it, and with a whole lot of other people at the bottom of it. And she said they couldn't imagine no hierarchy. They just wanted to have one that was different. How do we imagine more than we're going to be led to imagine by our media, by our politicians, in the small time allowed, as Joy points out? Favianna.
Yeah, well, when I think about what happened and like how they opted towards the same thing they knew, it just reminds me that they were attached to a story, and we can show a different kind of story. And really, as people get connected to their ancestral stories and also understand what is the story we need for the future, it becomes something they can, hook onto and latch to. But we need that story to become normalized, because right now the story of colonization and domination is so normalized that people can't even think outside of it. I mean, that's the power of culture. It literally becomes a part of what you can imagine, and it shapes the way you view reality. So we can present a different kind of reality that is really through a different lens, right? How we're seeing it. Like, what are we putting our focus on? What are we uplifting? The trees, the creatures, each other. And that's what I think we need to be doing in mass, and not just to have one vision, but to have many, many, many different visions, because we live on a biodiverse planet, and our futures can also be biodiverse. And I do think we are seeing it. I feel like often, like, we're a generation who previous generations fought so hard for our ability to be like unapologetic creatives. So yeah, I see it happening more and more.
What about you, X? You're a wonderful imaginer, and your videos do such an amazing job of pulling past, present, future, and possibility all into the same space. I don't kind of know how you do it, but clearly you think about this a lot.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was thinking very similarly to what Favianna said, just around the stories that are told to us by politicians, by the media, by these stories that we hold so closely to us as a society around what is possible, around our expectations of the future, our expectations of the people's role in building the future. And I think it's a time, I think I closed my contribution to the last conversation that we had with saying how, like, police abolition, it was something that was socially not a common conversation, and now is becoming a political reality and manifesting in policy and in how people are governing and changing city policy. I think the return of indigenous lands, land back, like, for me, like, that's really what the vision is for this year too. And it's something that people aren't yet comfortable with talking about or thinking about or exploring or understanding. But I think more and more of these revolutionary, transformative conversations, a world without borders, like, things like this are going to continue to manifest in, like, the social spaces. I think I don't want to use that word, but kind of guided by artists who will create these visuals, these stories, these narratives that will help, like, seed this into all of our minds. And then it'll grow and it'll become a cultural conversation. And what happens culturally will then influence policy and become a policy conversation. What does national land back policy look like? What is educating us in schools around these conversations look like? What is giving this information to children who would then grow up to be in these positions of cultural and political influence? Like if we start these conversations younger and younger. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about as well, from a very much a storytelling narrative, and really having seen things viewed as impossible become reality in the last couple of years. And so like, I think we're just on a trajectory of continuing to see that happen.
Absolutely. You want to jump in, Favianna?
Yeah, just that art is a seed. Like it is the beginning. A story is a seed. When we think about even Me Too, it took sometimes people tell their story and they open the doors for the other stories to emerge, just because you need courage to tell a story, to move out of shame and stigma and isolation, into being able to magnify it, and then more stories appear. That's the power of creation, is the seed of an idea that shifts the perspective to a point where you are like, wow, I feel so empowered by that. And so I encourage also for people to create and to support creatives, because that's what we're doing. We're trying to seed new ideas and inspire other people to also, share, and so that we can work towards normalizing a story.
What do they say? They tried to bury us. They didn't know we were seeds.
Yeah, totally.
It's such a great saying. It is true. The stories we tell. I mean, I come out of the movement of coming out in the 80s and 90s. And when we came out and said who we were, we changed the world for people around us. And I think of poets whose name I will remember in a minute, who talk about, when a woman speaks, the world is cracked open. We do change reality as we participate in it. But I will say time is short. To go back to what Joy was saying, where can we get your music, X? Where can we see your work, Favianna? How can we embed ourselves in this difference? Because, I'm not alone at the Laura Flanders Show. We have a team, a small team of about 9 people, and we work really hard. But we are one little show in a huge mainstream media morass that doesn't connect the dots on these things generally, that doesn't give people space to imagine alternatives, let alone actually see them, because I think they're actually out there. We just don't report on them enough. And I think of the people that we have talked to on the show who say, there was a woman from Minneapolis who I was asking about the multiracial cross-sectoral organizing that happened after the killing of George Floyd. And she said, I asked her, where did you get the oomph to believe this could happen? And she said, at Standing Rock. It was my experience at Standing Rock that changed my sense of how we could live together. We need more of those experiences. I can bring what I can bring on the TV screen, and I hope that it infects people a bit. But how do we provide the palpable, the sense that this kind of macro change that we're talking about, meaning systemic from the root change, is not just possible, but help people feel it palpably? Favianna.
Yeah, well, I think remembering that the colonizer made us think that it's all about rational information, but I encourage you to think about what touches you emotionally, what drum beats, what visuals, what songs, what words, like really activate your senses and support artists, support BIPOC artists, like really invest in them, buy their music. Don't just listen to Spotify, like go buy an artist's album, support them, like donate to them, buy artwork, buy books. We need right now a rising of the creatives to offset this, colonial mentality, like Fela Kuti said. Like we literally have the power to disrupt it, because what we create is not just about something beautiful you see. It is something you feel, that it is embodied in you. It becomes a part of like changing your brain so that we are more ready to welcome in and usher in a different kind of future. So I would say that's what I encourage your audience to do, is to really support artists. And when you decide what show to look at, what book to read, what kind of music to listen to, what books, children's books you're getting for your kids, invest and support in artists and expose yourself to, a culture that is going to help you be revolutionary.
X, where do we get your music?
Beautiful. Music, all streaming platforms. We have a campaign coming out May 14th that I'm incredibly excited about, that is going to be very multi-layered. It'll have a public art element where we've created this incredible artwork in collaboration with different Indigenous artists. And we want to essentially make it accessible for everybody to be able to download, to weep paste in their cities, to share this message of take it all back, of returning, you know, these lands, these spaces to Indigenous stewardship. And so that campaign, you know, keep your eyes out for that. There's going to be an apparel collection designed with Indigenous artists. There's going to be art that you can download and share and put up in your city, in your community. And there's going to be a song and a music video. So there's many, many layers of how you're going to be able to engage. But all of my discography is on, you know, on Bandcamp, which is the best way to support artists, as well as all streaming platforms. And just to respond to that last question too, I think, how do we make people really feel and be bought into this idea that we can build an alternative future? Where we are right now is because our ancestors did that work as well in their time. And our ancestors from hundreds of years back to even just great social movements over the last century too, that have, I think, helped shape where we are today and build the pathway for us to be having conversations around land back and abolition, and Medicare for all. Like all these different things, I think, came from people who fought for this before us. And for me, grounding myself in that history has been really important. And I think also this country does a really good job at disempowering us through teaching a very false narrative of history, that doesn't center community power, that erases a lot of voices of Black, Brown, and Indigenous people, specifically women and femmes. And I think, you know, we have an opportunity to reclaim knowledge in a lot of really powerful ways in our understanding of history. And like that for me has been such a powerful tool in imagining new futures, is knowing that where we came from was spaces where we radically altered our surrounding, where there was a time, you know, where like the Jim Crow South, like that, there was nothing politically possible beyond that. We were like, communities were told that that was the reality and that's how it was going to be. And people fought to dismantle that. And not to say things are perfect, but we have progressed from these different eras of significant violence. And it's because of organizers on the ground dreaming, doing the work, and putting it in. So now we're at another crossroads, and we draw from the inspiration of those who have laid the pathway for where we are right now. And that's what will help guide us to the future, is being grounded in our history, in our ancestry.
Favianna's exploding there.
Yeah, I mean, like Georgia, the win we have in Georgia, the power, we have definitely shifted, and yet the white supremacist machine will come down hard, as we're seeing, because they just can't bear to lose power. And what it means also, to your point, X, is really getting behind Black, Indigenous, and women of color, femmes of color, because, you know, as we saw even from the last election, we couldn't even do 24 hours of celebrating the powerful work of Black women. We couldn't even do that. And now we have the opportunity to continue on that path and really just, you know, uplift the transformative work, and also to your point, X, heal, to really sit with the truth. And I'm so glad that now, you know, there's so many films and documentaries where we're understanding the traumatic impact that this harm, and so that we can heal from that harm towards a different future. And we need to reconcile with it, and also do the generational healing that in the past may not have been possible.
Beautiful. I want to just read you some of the chats on the chat. Jeannie Hopper, our wonderful DJ and podcast producer, says, yes, support artists as directly as possible. Algorithms got no rhythm. Nice to hear, Jeannie. They don't compensate the artists, and music streaming services are an example of extractive capitalism. Well put. She also endorses Bandcamp. Definitely, people, if you're listening, go to Bandcamp. Don't go with that Spotify Pandora, even though that Pandora word is another act of theft, if you ask me. I want to, again, just reiterate to people how important art is to our programming. And I know that we're going to be getting these guests back on. I will just say that I have one last, I guess, kind of serious question, which is about balance. You know, I remember we started this entire PBS syndication series, which was last September. The show had been online and been radio and all these sorts of things on cable, but we decided to take the leap with no apparent net to catch us, onto public television syndication with the work of Alice Shepherd from Kinetic Light, who's a fantastic choreographer, a wheelchair dancer, amazing creator of Impossible. And I remember, I came on, isn't it, we wanted to start with this season with people that do the impossible. And she was kind of not impressed with that. She's like, yeah, not impossible, actually, we do it. And our point is that it's beautiful. And I appreciated that. Like, it's not just to show something's possible. We have to show that it's beautiful, that it's appealing, that you'll love equity, and get used to it. And I guess the serious part of my question is, how much do you spend any time bothering to think about persuading people who don't agree with you? Or is all your work to put wind behind the wings or beneath the wings of, the people that you think of as your people that need all that wind for sure? X.
Yeah, I mean, this is something that we grapple with all the time as organizers and as artists, and knowing your audience and who you're really speaking to. And there's value in both. There's value in understanding the moments that it is time to like cross these lines, to try to reach out to folks that don't agree with us, and people that are at the margins of political beliefs or understandings of what it is we're fighting for. And I think what we can really look to, that I'm very inspired by, is Indigenous organizers that build coalitions with oftentimes conservative farmers in rural communities, because
but I got to switch to Favianna. I'm being told we have 10 seconds.
Go ahead.
Go.
Yes. I would say that we have to tell the story that's authentic to our experience, because our stories are universal, and moving away from centering whiteness means embracing the complexity, and also remembering that the more we tell the personal, authentic story, the more people we can reach.
All right. I love you both. And Aja in absentia. She's out there doing some good work somewhere. We did start off this year with a whole week of celebration of what happened in Georgia. So check out our first show of January. And we will continue to talk with people like yourselves, I'm hoping, in this series. So good luck with the release. X, keep up the fantastic work, Favianna. And if people haven't subscribed yet to the Laura Flanders Show, what are you waiting for? All right, that's all I have to say. Love you all. Have a great weekend. Talk soon. Bye.